Welcome back, guys. Hopping into a fun one today, and one that's pretty popularly requested, at least in terms of the questions I've been getting a lot lately, which is how can we train in the weight room or kind of program our strength and conditioning work to complement Jiu-Jitsu or Muay Thai or MMA, but more so combat sports. What can we do in the weight room to make sure that we're getting the most out of our sport? Now, we can look at this through a few different angles. I have clients who are all the way from, very basic weekend warriors. They just roll for fun or do Muay Thai for fun, all the way up to now guys who are in the UFC. So, how can we make the most out of our time in the weight room to complement that? I think starting out looking, let's look on the lower end of, I am somebody who's just doing, the sport for fun. Or maybe even we'll have people who do have a higher training age, and they're really good at training for hypertrophy, for example, doing more bodybuilding stuff. And then we'll get people that actually have a very, very low training age in the weight room, and they have a much higher training age of the skill itself. So doing jiu-jitsu, doing kickboxing stuff, MMA stuff, whatever it is, they've been doing that for a while, but haven't really trained well in the weight room. So how can we merge the two to get the most out of, our sport itself? So really the biggest thing is gonna be resource allocation. So let's look at how high is sport volume. For example, if I'm doing the sport 6 days per week, let's say for an hour each, that's a lot of volume of skill work, which is not a bad thing. If my goal is to get really good at the skill itself, I probably want to do more skill, but I'm probably not also going to have the time or even the physiological and neurological resources for me to be doing 6 days a week of weight training as well. So with my higher level guys, typically in an off season, we'll do 2 to 3 days per week, whittling down towards the back end of camp, usually almost always 2 days per week of strength training. That's it, right? Typically for an hour, some days 45 minutes. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of time, but it is plenty of time to get a lot done. And we'll get into what exactly we should be getting done to get the most out of our sport. But I think the first thing is really recognizing, okay, there are going to be time constraints and resource constraints for the training that we're going to be doing. So how can we get the most out of our training? And let's start to be more specific with what we're choosing to make sure that we are accounting for that. So getting into the actual nuts and bolts of what we're doing, we could just say, okay, we're decent at sport. What is our limitation, right? Is it strength? Is it speed? Is it, I can't do very well in jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai because my shoulder hurts all the time, or my knee hurts all the time, or my hip hurts all the time, right? So it could just be building high functioning, resilient joints kind of as our step one. Step two could be also layering in, whatever physical qualities we lack that make us better at our sport. I'll get into that in a second, kind of differentiating between jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. But I think something that's underrated, especially for a lot of low skill trainees, is incorporating plyometrics. And even for if you're a meathead and you like to do jiu-jitsu on the side, what can you do to incorporate plyometrics in your training? Like literally just throw some light, low tier, whatever you want to call them, extensive plyometrics in your warm up. So if we're gonna do, let's say for example, something for the hip, something for the shoulder, maybe I do a kettlebell arm bar, maybe I do a supported hip airplane, then maybe I do some sort of pogo hop, right? Something that's gonna be lower intensity, almost mimicking jumping rope, but starting to get better at managing my body while I'm trying to also get better at managing ground contact. So body control with repetitive ground contacts, that's gonna be really helping us just build the skill capacity we need to do higher intensity jumps, right? So maybe in a warm up, I layer some in on the back end, and then maybe each training day that I do, I layer in one more medium to high intensity plyometric where I'm expressing max effort or higher forces in terms of ground contact forces, right? I don't know, broad jumping, hopping, hurdles, etc. Something where I'm gonna be doing higher intensity jumping work. If I do that every day, I'm probably gonna be getting the benefits of doing that, right? I'm not training to be a track star, I'm training to be a better combat sport athlete. Those things, I think, although it may not look like it has direct carryover, I think being more explosive, being better at managing ground contacts will make us, twitchier, quicker athletes, and also just having that body control, I think will have a lot of carryover to being better at the sport itself. Pretty good place to start. I think we could kind of differentiate between jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai a bit and make some generalizations. I think for both athletes, typically we'll see a lot of hip issues. We don't rotate well for the hips at all. I think a lot looking at jiu-jitsu is we're kind of in an open hip position, so think more shortened glutes. Getting to a position where we're getting more length to our glutes, so think more unilateral based stuff, split stance based stuff, getting the pelvis to shift over a single leg base of support is incredibly important for just maintaining hip function. I think we're gonna see the same thing too in more striking based sports where everything we do is so driven through global rotation that we may not have the requisite components of local rotation, meaning maybe I rotate so much through my entire pelvis moving, my ribcage moving, everything's moving together, that when I actually need to get the components of that, which might be, I don't know, let's say lead leg, hip, and center rotation, let's say if I'm doing a cross, something like getting actual protraction from my scapula, When I get into isolation, I may not be able to do that as well because a lot of the positions that I'm accessing are more so of a consequence of inertia or momentum. So sit with that for a second, but let's not assume because we see certain positions in the sport that we're automatically good at that, especially if a lot of the times when we're accessing that as a consequence of velocity per se. Keeping that in mind, let's still make sure we're addressing, shoulder. Let's still make sure we're addressing hip, right? We're still looking at these joints and making sure we can express function at those joints, meaning, again, going back, maybe I'm doing a split squat, walking a lunge, rear foot elevated split squat, making sure I can actually do stuff on one leg and move to that front hip, get back hip extension, etc. Maybe I'm still gonna make sure, even though I do a lot of this kind of motion like this, I'm still doing a landmine press to make sure I can disassociate my rib cage moving from my scap moving, right? So if I'm gonna get a lot of those together when I'm throwing punches, maybe in the weight room, I'm gonna disassociate those things, right? Actually build some strength in my shoulder. It's not reliant on me actually getting rotation for the rest of my body as well. But that's kind of a good representation of how we might train sport specificity, even though it's a general exercise, right? It's a lunge, it's a landmine press. Now, we could make a heuristic probably. People that have more of a jiu-jitsu background are more like naturally strong, right? It makes sense. You're doing a lot of things that are kind of max effort isometrics, a lot of more strength work. And we can probably make a heuristic that, more striking sports, so like Muay Thai, boxing, are probably more naturally quicker, right? They're quicker, more explosive, more powerful. We might be lacking more strength. So maybe just taking that heuristic, we can assess the person in front of us. Maybe it's us, maybe it's a client, right? Maybe we fail to match that heuristic, or maybe I have a boxing guy that's strong. Maybe I have a jiu-jitsu guy who is weak but fast, right? So maybe we might have some outliers there, but generally speaking, not a bad heuristic to follow. So what does that mean? Maybe I'm not gonna waste a ton of time doing max strength work for an athlete who's very strong. Maybe we get better at expressing that force, expressing power, quickness, twitchiness, whatever you want to call it. Maybe for a striking athlete who's very quick and explosive but lacks general strength, maybe we spend time getting stronger, right? Maybe we do some absolute strength stuff. It doesn't mean that we're getting rid of, I have the Muay Thai guy doing only strength work and no power work and vice versa. But just having more of a priority towards those qualities that we're lacking could help us a lot in terms of being a more well-rounded athlete. Those are kind of the things that I like to look at with these sports. If I kind of have like a TLDR, I would say, okay, let's pick some main lifts. If we're training 2, 3, maybe even 4 days a week, main patterns, maybe it's horizontal push-pull, vertical push-pull, hinge, lunge, squat, the same stuff that we're gonna be doing for everybody. Pick which of those are most important for our sport. Find ways to double down. Okay, maybe I'm gonna do for my lower body strength work, I'm gonna do a lunge variation because that can actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone in terms of training strength and training hip function, right? So look where we can whittle down from a resource allocation standpoint to match the time that we have in the gym, but follow the basic patterns. Make sure you have the ability to move well through the hip, move well through the shoulder, do some actually direct core work, things that are gonna help us be better at sport in a more of a general way. So don't make these exercises look too much like sport, especially if we're getting a very high volume of sport, right? Let's make the main thing. Let's make training complement sport, not training look like sport, because we're getting enough sport already. So yeah, build strength in those patterns, address hip and shoulder function, do some plyos, especially to help out with just general body control, quickness, whatever other qualities we're gonna look at in terms of how we could progress those to be a more powerful, twitchy athlete. And then less is more. So yeah, again, we probably don't need more. We need to make sure we're getting the right amount to complement our sport itself, especially if sport volume is high. We really don't need to be weight room warriors. We want to make sure, again, that we're using this as a tool to help us express these qualities and also just be more resilient when we're actually doing sport itself. So if that makes sense, if not, ask extra questions below, reach out. I'm always happy to do follow-up videos and converse with you guys in the comments as well. If you need help with your training, if you're looking on how to integrate some of these things to complement yourself with your striking sport, jiu-jitsu, or even just help you assess your clients, you want to get into training more people that are in the combat sports realm, press the link below. We can talk some more about working together. As always, appreciate you guys for sticking around. Please like, please subscribe. Your support means a lot to me, and see you guys soon.